climate has a lot of science. We have to link with universities and laboratories and these sort of things. We need talent. We need capital. We need entrepreneurs. We need all these critical components to come together to help the climate ecosystem really form and then get thriving. Nobody working in email security is going, this is my life's work. Nothing like what you have in climate, where people have that fantastic true north of, we just got to solve this. We just got to get this done. So that is insanely powerful.
Welcome back to Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. I'm Somil.
And I'm Silas. Each week, we publish the secrets to success from investors, founders, operators, and experts in climate tech around the world. Building a startup is hard. Building a climate tech startup is even harder. But we make it a little bit easier.
We put a lot of effort into these shows, so we hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and let us know who you think we should have on next.
With that, let's get into today's episode. Hey everyone, quick note for you. You're currently listening to the free preview of this episode. If you'd like the full thing, the full shebang, go over to our Substack. That's cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid subscriber. Any paid subscription gets you full access to the show on the Clean Techies Substack.
Alrighty, folks, we are coming back at you with a bit of a different episode today. We are speaking with Duncan Logan, the co-founder of 90. That's 9, the number, and then 0, spelled out. A company trying to help coordinate the global climate tech community through their in-person co-working spaces and digital communities. Duncan founded RocketSpace and has a long history of being involved with startups that would go on to become unicorns. Think of names like Uber, Spotify, and FlexPort. This experience working with tech broadly gives him a kind of nice view on building climate tech startups specifically. And that's what we discussed today. What they're building, why he's excited about climate tech, the lessons climate founders can apply from the tech founders of the world. And we even get to hear a little bit of the story of how he ended up meeting Elon Musk at one point. There's a lot packed in this episode, so we hope you enjoy.
All right, welcome to the show, Duncan. How are you doing today?
Great. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Good to see you again. It's good. We happen to be able to bump into each other during Climate Week, which is a nice occasion. Very exhausting, but a nice occasion. So It's good to see you guys. But I'm really excited to have this episode with you. I guess tell people who are listening. Our first question is always, if you could have dinner with any climate tech OG, or as we like to call them, clean techies, who would that be and why?
I think it would have to be Musk, just because Elon Musk, I think, is just in such a different league in what he's doing at the moment in so many different areas. And I know he's getting some political flack, which I think is understandable and justified, to be honest. But what he has done across so many different companies is really, as I say, it's just in a different league to every other entrepreneur on the world at this point. And he now has infinite capital, both intellectual capital, he can call on, I think, really an army of people to come and work for him, and financial capital. And I hope he's just getting started. I hope what we see him doing now, landing rockets or producing, rolling out batteries or electric infrastructure, is just a starting point of what he's capable of. What he's done with Tesla over the last decade, it's not a car company. Yes, it has cars, but the whole battery tech that he's really developed and pushed forward, the whole infrastructure tech, I mean, even the way they build factories is leading edge. It's just incredible on so many different aspects. So I have met him once, but yeah, to sit down and have dinner with him would be exceptional.
Would you mind telling just a little bit about the story behind meeting him?
Yeah, it was in San Francisco. It was part of I think it was the Swedish government or Norwegian government, and he was trying to get some deal to Norway or Sweden with Tesla, and they had this reception in San Francisco. And ironically, he was chatting away with like 3 or 4 of us, and he asked me what I did, and at the time I was working on a company called RocketSpace, and he just lasered in and says, "What do you do? What is that working on?" And I felt like, well, it's a place you can park rockets. But yeah, he was on it. So yeah, I got a good 5-6 minutes chatting with him.
That must be maybe a hack. If you need to get a hold of him, you just have a company that's got names that will he'll like to.
Yeah.
Right? Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate that. I especially appreciate the comment around if he continues to utilize his resources, if you will, because he can, not his own money, but like he can get the capital of many other people behind him if he does something. So hopefully he'll continue pushing the boundaries and keep going. I think it's something we need, is the people who've gone through this whole process. Like, think about the knowledge he has of scaling up hardware. Like, that is something, you can learn a little bit about it through that book that was just recently written about him. But like, having his knowledge specifically to oversee something could really be helpful to push these things forward.
It's every single component of his business. From they're an infrastructure company, and they're probably one of the best rolling out infrastructure. The pace that they can roll out a new gigafactory or a new battery plant is just exceptional. And they even showed that with with X.AI. I think they rolled out, they created the largest, compute power in something like 19 days. It's just on a scale and speed that nobody else can imagine. And, if there's a way to disseminate his skill set across more entrepreneurs, that'd be phenomenal. But actually, I think given where we are, we just need to have him focus more on climate, see how we can get him to focus more on climate.
Exactly. I was going to say, if you could pitch him on, pushing some other idea for it, he'd be a good person for it. I think there's, maybe this is underrated and some people, again, have their issues with him. But if you look at the community of people that come out of Tesla and SpaceX, because he attracts such kind of dense amount of talent, they end up building a lot of these companies. You look at Redwood Materials for one, obviously. Like there's a lot of these companies that are really doing some cool things. So maybe we could talk more about talent and attraction later on. But we do need to know a little bit about you. So tell us kind of your journey. How did you end up getting into what you're doing today? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm Scottish. I always say that as if people wouldn't know that because I don't recognize my own accent. But I was born and bred in Scotland. My parents were farmers. I still adore agriculture, still watch. I have a sort of addiction to watching agriculture all around the world. But I actually went into derivatives straight out of university, became a derivative trader, investment banker, and then moved across pretty quickly into tech and started a tech company when I was 24, sold it when I was 27, and then joined one of the most, fantastic entrepreneurs as he was building his company, a guy called Ben White, who built Message Labs, and he ended up selling that company I was an early exec on the team, but, he ended up selling that company to Symantec in 2008. And that was my real move to the Silicon Valley, like a moth to the flame. I then started a company called RocketSpace in 2011, and RocketSpace is really the precursor to 9.0, but we just built without, we were, shall we say, unconsciously incompetent. We didn't really know what we were building, but as we built it came apparent that we pulled together this ecosystem of just incredible entrepreneurs back in 2011, 2012, that would include Uber and the team from Spotify, and Leap Motion, Kabam, Mog, Supercell, all these FlexPort. Ryan at FlexPort was just one person in there. And we just created this ecosystem where there were an incredible number of high quality entrepreneurs. Wherever you have that sort of talent, there's always going to be money. So, lots of high quality investors kicking around that ecosystem as well. And it ended up being this sort of factory for unicorns in San Francisco. And we didn't totally realize that at the time. But the truth is, I think birds of a feather flock together, and then you are a product of your environment. And those two things are really, really important. People who have a high passion to really build a significant company, not a lifestyle business, but to really go out there and try and change the world or fail, but sort of die trying. Those people, they are birds of a feather, and they do flock together. And when we created this atmosphere where everyone was just trying to up and outpace each other, And I think it rubbed off on a lot of people. And so RocketSpace, we raised about 350 million into the company. We expanded into China and into Europe, and we just had this incredible ecosystem. Unfortunately, we raised the vast amount of the money from China. And China, when we were raising money there, was all gangbusters. It looked like it was really adopting capitalistic, tendencies. And then they had this, Xi Jinping had this enormous change, remembering that they are in fact a communist nation, and it became incredibly complicated to work in the structure of the deal that we had. And then Donald Trump came to power, and relationships with China soured, and we ended up returning the capital and winding the business down. But it was an incredible experience for a decade, and definitely the precursor for what we're thinking about with 9-0.
You know that feeling when you meet someone who shares your vision for the future? It just clicks, like two peas in a pod. Well, that's exactly how we felt when we met Goodwin, who we are proud to have as our sponsor.
Being the first major law firm to set up a climate-specific startup and venture practice makes them exactly the kind of partner we are excited to work with. They realize that there are a plethora of challenges to building climate tech startups, and that's why they have built an entire suite of resources for founders, investors, and entrepreneurs in the space. They even offer several tailored pricing methods. And guess what? It doesn't matter where you are listening to this. Goodwin is a global law firm that you can trust to be your partner through it all. From incorporation to exit, they've got you covered.
Go to goodwinlaw.com and tell them Clean Techie sent you to get exclusive access to startup resources. All right, back to the show.
And just to clarify, so what was RocketSpace exactly? It was like a kind of like a space where we work together.
It was I would say it's it's cross between an accelerator and co-working. So it was, the revenue generation came from co-working, and we started that before anyone had heard of Industrious or WeWork, or the only real co-working space was serviced offices at places like Regis. So this idea of pulling together co-working in that format was still very new. And then we just added lots of programs, external programs, corporate innovation programs, and other things on top to help those entrepreneurs be successful.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then I guess so from there, how did you, and tell us a story about 9-0, like how did this come to be? How did you specifically get this interest in climate?
So the interest in climate really came, when we were winding down RocketSpace, I was thinking about what's next. And I, like so many people have lived through, the red days in Silicon Valley when, the sun didn't rise, or the sun did rise, but nobody saw it because there's so much smoke. I had moved to a place called Santa Barbara, just north of LA, and bought a house here. And we had this almighty fight to try and get insurance for the house. And insurance companies just left, and all our neighbors were doing exactly the same. And so climate was being sort of becoming more and more in my face. Yeah. And I have two little kids who are going through the California school system, and are both sort of radical environmentalists, and it's great seeing what they're like. And I just wondered, maybe climate is the thing I should, spend the latter part of my life on. And when I started to dig into the numbers, like any entrepreneur, you go, well, how big's this market? What's it look like? And suddenly I just realized that the climate revolution is going to dwarf the digital revolution. It really is on a different quantum. Solving climate change or mitigating the effects of climate change, and we're likely to do both, is this enormous challenge, but then it's also an enormous opportunity. And as an entrepreneur, I think you always have to look at where's the puck moving to, and how certain are you that the puck's going to go there? You could have said the puck's moving towards crypto 10 years ago, and it is, but it hasn't had that breakout moment. Or you could say virtual reality is where the puck's heading. It probably is, but when's it going to be there? But with climate, you have this you can see that the puck is moving there. And there is certainty because there's an exponential effect of climate change. And we see, Mother Nature's doing the marketing for us. this is going to be forced upon us. We don't have to build this market. The market is going to be forced upon us, whether we like it or not. So I just saw, really from a very capitalistic point of view, here's an enormous market. I think I have high certainty that we're gonna have to do something serious about it in my lifetime. And, above all that, there's an opportunity to really do something for good, for society, for my kids, on a personal basis. And so it just became a no-brainer for me to go all in and think, what impact can I have?
Yeah. And then I guess, so just the nuts and bolts, what exactly, how would you describe 9.0? Is it really similar to what you guys were building before? Like, explain just the kind of basics of what you guys are doing. Climate tech founders are taking on a huge challenge. Not only do they need to know how to build a startup, but they also need to deal with hardware, have a strong handle on climate policy, know how to fundraise from diverse investor types. It's a lot.
That's why we made Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. In addition to our jobs, we devote 20 hours a week to producing this podcast for you. This way you can learn from the people who have walked the path before you, learn from their mistakes, and gain insights on navigating this complex journey. If this mission resonates with you, we are asking for your help. It takes a lot of effort and it's not free.
If you are already a subscriber and want to help, start supporting us today by going to Substack and clicking Upgrade to Paid. Thanks for helping all the climate tech entrepreneurs like you.
Yeah. So when Matthew and I, my co-founder, Matthew Jank, and I were really beginning to dig into the climate opportunity or the climate issue, one of the things we asked ourselves is, where do we need to move to somewhere to be at the heart of climate? Where do we need to move to New York, or to, where is the heart of climate? And that was a starting point for us. We said, it's weird. There's going to be this huge industry, but there is no Silicon Valley for climate. There is no Hollywood for climate. If you're an actor, you go to Hollywood. If you're techie, you go to Silicon Valley. If you're finance, you might go to Wall Street. But there is no heart for climate. And I think that is an enormous, to the detriment of everyone working in climate and to the detriment of solving the climate problem. We have seen, whenever you create these clusters of excellence, the pace of progress just accelerates. And so that was our starting component. And I said, okay, how would we build a Silicon Valley of climate? And then we actually, it's such a big industry, there's not going to be one Silicon Valley of climate. I think there'll be a dozen. So we said, okay, let's identify 8 key locations in the US and try and be the catalyst for building these climate ecosystems in each one of those. So that's really our mission. How we're doing it is similar to RocketSpace, but different in the sense of we're taking physical space. Another thing we identified was, when we joined a lot of these groups, but there's dozens, if not hundreds, of digital climate communities, which is great, and some of them are niche and some of them are broad, but they all exist. A lot of them started during COVID, and they have these, communities of passionate people all in a digital format. But I think, I've seen this firsthand. When people are in physical proximity to each other, there's something special about that. Yeah. And I just think there's an opportunity, while the real estate market is going through this kind of generational change, there's an opportunity to set up 8 physical climate hubs across the US and then work ferociously to pull all the key component parts of what an entrepreneur would need to be successful in the climate market into those hubs. So, as you know, climate has a lot of science. We have to link with universities and laboratories and these sort of things. We need talent, we need capital, we need entrepreneurs, we need corporate engagement, we need government engagement, we need all these, we need regulation engagement. We need all these critical components to come together to help the climate ecosystem really form and then get thriving. And the tricky part out of that was, if we want to be that catalyst, how can we how can we monetize ourselves so that we can grow as a business so that we can actually do that at scale? And so that is where we said, well, the easiest way around that would be to form a physical community that people pay to be a part of, and add some co-working in there for people as well. But if you look at our San Francisco office, we found a phenomenal partnership actually with a landlord I've worked with before, SKS and the Swig company. They had bought this 350,000 square foot tower on California Street, and we had identified California Street as a key corridor in San Francisco that we could make into the climate alley for San Francisco. So we did a partnership with them, and we only have a small part of that building, but now we're trying to encourage climate companies to move into the building, into some of the empty floors above us, and it's starting to happen. So we start as a catalyst. We're just that small component, and then gradually it builds out and builds out and builds out until hopefully one day, in a decade's time, you'll look down California Street and you'll go, wow, this is the climate alley of San Francisco.
Why specifically that street?
So there's kind of three main arteries in San Francisco. There's Mission Street, Market Street, and California. That's how we kind of looked at it. And, it was really driven by homelessness and safety and security. That Mission Street, is great down around the Salesforce Tower and stuff, but it has problems further up the street. Market Street is really more of a retail, or should be more of a experiential sort of existence. And so California Street had this real opportunity in the downtown FIDI of San Francisco, where we are, is probably the cleanest and safest. So to be honest, that's why we settled on that. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to this whole embarking on trying to, I don't know how you say, set the tone for a particular neighborhood or area. I'm a big fan of this. I think, obviously we got to bump into each other at Climate Week, and there's so many of these kind of collisions that happen. And I do very much agree that there's something to be said about being in person and being able to, have that quick bump into each other. You could spend a lot of time talking about what happens in person, but what I really want to understand is how you envision trying to bring together these multiple hubs, right? Because I think the challenge to me lies in how do you actually get these to work together? Because when you think about climate, you mentioned a few things, right? You mentioned policy being important, funding being important, scientific kind of folks being important, talent, et cetera. And if you look at the US, you could say, okay, well, in the US, we've got the policy stuff mostly, at least at a federal level, happening in DC. You've got a lot of different types of finance folks in New York. Obviously, you've got a VC ecosystem pretty robust for climate in San Francisco, but in California broadly. But there's a different type of finance, a lot of the private equity finance in New York. And then you've got some deep tech innovation happening in Boston. And then on the other hand, you've got kind of the oil and gas incumbents that likely will partner to help bring the climate future forward in Houston. So how do you bring together these areas that have kind of their unique spaces? How do you think about this?
Yeah, well, you've mentioned these are all locations where, when we evaluated or looked at the climate ecosystem across the US, we said, energy is in Houston, Washington, DC for policy, San Francisco, New York, they all have their strengths. And so rather than saying, well, let's just focus on one. I think if you go back to the digital revolution, the Bay Area got away with it in being that kind of global mecca for the digital revolution. And you look at all the amazing companies from Apple and Google and so forth, Meta, that all came out of there. That everyone's seen that happen now. Nobody's going to let that happen. Europe's not going to take so long to catch up with the US on that. And I think everyone can see the climate revolution, and everyone's going to want a part of that. Yeah. So I think there's an opportunity actually for, 8 or so in the US, but then another 100 around the world. And that's a good thing. Yeah. So our thing is to start by doing what we're looking at is building these geo-focused communities in each of those locations. So pull all the people working on climate together in the Bay Area, do the same in Seattle, do the same in LA, find all the people working on climate or passionate around climate in Houston and New York and so on, and pull them together there. But, and I think we talked about this at Climate Week. The Climate Week is great to get momentum, and it's great to see people getting inspired and to bring people into an industry. But to actually move things forward, you know, if you take a piece of climate, and there are thousands of them. So let's just take, you know, sustainable aviation fuel, yeah, which is one very important critical area. That needs policy, it needs talent, it needs science, it needs the oil companies, it needs the airline company, you know, that once we've got these geo-focused hubs, then we want to pool industry-focused communities together digitally. So there will be people working on sustainable aviation fuel in the Bay Area, in Seattle, in Houston, in New York. Well, how do we pull them together? And that's on a digital platform or through physical events. And I think the value of doing something like Climate Week, or I think what we will see at Climate Week is actually, you'll go to Climate Week and there'll be people saying, yeah, I'm at Energy Week, or I'm going to stay at the Energy Hub in Climate Week, or I'm going to stay at the Circular Economy Hub in Climate Week, or I'm going to focus on the Climate Finance Hub. And these hubs, you know, it might still be Climate Week, but it won't be us all flying or racing around New York trying to get to all sorts of different events. You'll say, okay, all the climate finance events are going to happen at this location. All the sustainable aviation fuel events are going to happen at that location. And I think 9-0 can play a really important role in helping that come about so that we actually get more done at a Climate Week, you know, rather than just hearing people speak and catching up with each other and so forth. We actually try and drive an agenda through these weeks. Or, you know, don't wait for Climate Week. We just have Sustainable Aviation Fuel Week, or we have, you know, Carbon Capture Week in different locations.
Yeah. I do think that there is a challenge. We did a whole episode on recapping our thoughts on this. I think your kind of take on Climate Week it makes a lot of sense to me and seems in line with what we hope is happening. But I guess to go back to the thread, so your kind of objective is let's have these hubs, let's help each other connect in person, but then have kind of this digital thread between them to help orchestrate, if you will, the kind of collaboration between the different hubs in at least the US, and then obviously you can go globally.
Hey there. That is the end of the free preview of this episode. To get the full conversation, upgrade to any paid subscription by going over to cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe, and you choose any paid subscriber tier. Any of them will get you access to the full version of this episode, as well as all the episodes we put out, in addition to our special episodes that are oftentimes paid subscribers only, some posts as well. There's more value coming. One thing we recently rolled out is a chat among paid subscribers on WhatsApp where people kind of have a weekly give and ask. It's going pretty well so far. So if you'd like to be part of that community, you can also become a paid subscriber and get access. Just generally, you know, becoming a paid supporter of this podcast is a great way to show your support and to help us to keep telling the stories of the leading climate tech entrepreneurs in the world. So thank you so much for your support. If you are going to sign up, we really appreciate that. And if not, I guess we'll see you next time, and I'll make this pitch next time. So thank you so much.